really do. You're a 21-year-old punk fucking kid. Grandpa's given you everything all your fucking life. You've never had a car payment, a house payment. Everything you live in was given to you by Grandpa. You fucking don't know what it's like to work for a fucking living like I do, to bust my fucking ass and do what I do. And you know what, Shawn? You fucked me, and that's the way you got it. But you know what? Your grandpa's money will run out someday, and you'll have to feast for yourself. Get a fucking job, you piece of shit.
Welcome to Behind the Smoke Podcast, Barbecue War Stories. My name is Sean Walchef from Cali Comfort Barbecue. I'm here with Derek Marceau from Valley Farm Market, and we are recording above the butcher shop in East County, San Diego. We started this podcast to talk about business, to talk about marketing, to go behind the smoke and let people in on what it's like to really own a business and what it's like to fail, what it's like to succeed and bring people on like Jim Trotter.
We failed pretty good.
We failed really good. Yeah. When you listen to voicemails like that,
that's where you learn, though.
I think we should. I think we should start recording the facial expressions from people that first listen to that voicemail. As Ernie Hahn put it, you don't need Red Bull. You just need that voicemail, and you're good to go. So
yeah, it gets you pumped up.
Jim
give him a Snickers.
Jim Trotter from ESPN. We are so honored to have you here, NFL insider, Hall of Fame voter. For those of you in San Diego, Chargers beat writer for many, many years. Worked as SI, worked for Sports Illustrated magazine. He got laid off from Sports Illustrated magazine, which we're going to dig into, especially with all the ESPN layoffs that are going on. But just somebody that we're so fortunate to call a close friend. If it wasn't for Twitter, we wouldn't be friends. There was a time when Jim went on to promote his book about Junior Seau, the life and death of a football icon. And it's an incredible book. He was on the Dave and Jeff show with CS Keys promoting his book, reminiscing about times that he became really good friends with Junior and how they used to go out to enjoy their time over at Seau's restaurant in Mission Valley, and how fight night was pretty special to them. I sent out a tweet to Jeff and to Jim and said, hey, if you guys are ever in need of a table on fight night, come out to Cali Comfort. And sure enough, here we are 3 years later. I've been harassing Jim to help me with the San Diego Love Letter Challenge to try to keep the Chargers in town, harassing him to help me with my entrance into Pro Football Ultimate Fan Association. And despite all that harassment,
no harassment.
Jim keeps coming back for tri-tips. So
yes, sir.
Welcome to Behind the Smoke, Jim. Thanks for joining us today.
No, I'm glad to be here. It's finally, I was waiting to see when I was going to get a chance to get in the chair. So.
You've always been invited. We just didn't have the date yet.
I got you.
Yeah,
I'm with that.
Yeah, that's part of the deal. One of the coolest things for Derek and I is, we are in the barbecue business. Derek has a specialty butcher shop, third generation butcher, and me owning a restaurant and catering business. We've been putting on amateur barbecue events, professional barbecue events, but sports entertainment is something that is near and dear to our heart. Derek and I both learned a lot through what we learned on the football field, what we learned on the basketball court.
It's crazy.
Just from our coaching.
I mean, you really think about it. The life lessons you learn at a young age that you don't even know that you're learning is you can't buy that shit.
Well, I think that's how you and I became such close friends is, we started raising money for the Spring Valley
Youth
amateur
kids.
Barbecue contests so kids could have pads to play football.
They couldn't afford to buy gear, so we figured out a way to make that happen for them.
Absolutely.
That's what's so sad about, I don't want to say this country today, but just the times today. When you think about the things we got to do growing up that you didn't have to pay for, when I remember when I played youth football, it didn't cost anything like what it costs now. And to think about the kids who are being excluded because they can't afford it today or something along those lines. It's one of those things where, to me, you're so short-sighted, you don't see the downside later in life and how that's going to impact just society. But we've taken away so many things from kids today that when I was growing up that you had, whether it was, the arts, whether it was music in school. When I was in school, in middle school, we had like a home ec class or we had a wood shop class for those who might not have wanted to go to college. And all these things are being taken away from kids today. And then we wonder why we have some of the issues that we have. So props to you guys for doing what you did.
Yeah, they always say there's no funding. There's no more funding for wood shop or auto. We had an auto class, and we can't do it anymore. There's no funding. Like, well, who was funding it, and what's going on?
Right.
How do we raise money? Shawn and I, one of our biggest things was that we don't want to just hand out money. We want to teach lessons. So if we can put something on, the people that we're giving money to, they get involved, the charities, everyone. So they're learning that you don't just ask for money. You have to work for it, come, experience the whole thing. And then, you get rewarded. That's important for us to teach those lessons and then be able to give that money to them. Like, you guys earned this. This isn't just given to you. You guys earned it, to fund all those things, like you said, that are going to the wayside. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So Jim, let's talk about your career in journalism, because I don't think there's any better person to talk to that's come from the newspaper world to the magazine world to the television world, and the world of sports, to be in 2017 covering the NFL, covering all these issues through Twitter, through Snapchat. I mean, we just saw from Los Angeles Times reported that SportsCenter is going to be featuring their own Snapchat channel, trying to catch that millennial market, that Gen X market. We live in a crazy world, and you've kind of seen, I mean, you yourself used to be a writer.
I'm still a writer.
But you're not a clickbait writer. Is that correct?
No, God, no. Man, I don't even know how to respond to that. I would hope I would hope there is no one out there who would ever think I was that.
Correct.
But I'll say this about clickbait. We get a lot of pushback from the public about some of the things that we feature, so to speak, whether I remember during the Tim Tebow time or now, or the Johnny Manziel time, or this, that, and the other. And people, why do you guys keep writing about this guy? Or why do you keep showing this? And the reality is because people keep clicking on it, or people keep watching. The viewership numbers you see spike when these individuals were on. So I always say to the public, as much as you want to get mad at us, you're complicit in this, because if you weren't clicking on it and you weren't watching it, we wouldn't be putting it up as often as we do.
Right. Sure. I mean, it's crazy to think. I mean, growing up watching SportsCenter, go from what it was to what it is now. It's just been it's been an incredible thing to watch, as a consumer, as somebody that, absolutely loves sports and loves athleticism and loves watching the story, the story, and also the story behind the story.
Sure.
For us, we're so fascinated with business, with stadiums, with how to create an experience, how to make, that NFL experience, how do you make it better? And that's a huge challenge that the NFL's facing right now, especially with relocation. I mean, something that you've covered with the San Diego Chargers. I mean, in 2013, you wrote a piece condemning the Qualcomm Stadium for SI.
Thing was, like I said, that place was an insult to dumps.
Yeah,
I mean, it was pathetic.
Totally.
And the Oakland Coliseum is just as bad. So it was clear why those two franchises needed a new stadium. The issue became who should pay for it. But just speaking about the venues themselves, setting aside all of the other stuff, they were both dumps and they were falling apart. And in today's age, you're not going to compete, and if you have facilities like that. So I remember when I was walking through Qualcomm getting sort of a tour of it before I did that column, and you see where the cement is falling off, or you look up at the Jumbotron and they tell you they have to get replacement parts on eBay because nobody makes them anymore. They're so old, or the fact that there are certain pockets in it where you can't get Wi-Fi just because of the way it's constructed and whatnot. And then you say that any franchise that's in the building like that is supposed to be able to compete financially with its competition around the league. It just doesn't work. But again, I'm saying all of that to say I'm setting aside all the other things about who should pay for it and all of that. I'm just talking about the building itself, and that place is a dump.
How do you remove yourself when you're dealing with a controversial topic like stadium relocation? How do you focus on the facts and try to, how did you get to where you are, where a piece like this still resonates today? I mean, the things that you said in 2013 about Qualcomm are still true to this day in 2017.
Well, the thing about that piece was it was a column, so I could give my opinion on things, more so than just presenting the straight facts. So for that one was easy, especially living here in San Diego and having spent so much time in that stadium. I don't know. I think I did that column. It didn't take very long. There are some that you write and it takes you all day to write, and there's some that you sit down and you're done in less than an hour or so. And that was one of those that was very easy to write.
Easy to write because of your time with the Chargers as a beat reporter?
Just having spent time in that building, having experienced it. It's like when I was writing the book on Junior, it didn't require as much reporting because a number of the things I had lived through. I had been there. I'd seen it. As opposed to never having met the man or never having, or in the case of Qualcomm, never having walked in that stadium or walking into it for the first time. I've been there when it rains and the sewage backs up and you're literally walking through shit to get out onto the field.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literal,
I know.
Yeah.
When the field is flooded. So, those are things I don't have to ask other people about it. I've been through it. So it's very easy to write a column like that.
So let's talk about Junior since you brought him up and how you guys became as close as you did.
I'll never forget the first time I met Junior. Of course I knew of him. I came to San Diego in 89. He got drafted in 90. I was covering high school, so I was never around the Chargers. And in 95, I believe it was, they asked me to be the backup on the Chargers beat. And so.
Who was the lead?
Kevin Kernan was. And so I, said, okay, it took a minute because I had been, doing some other things that I enjoyed, writing about hockey and writing about the NBA. So I said, okay. And I remember in the off season, I wanted to go introduce myself to guys, and I walked into the locker room. This is when they trained out at Qualcomm, and their off-season locker room was at Qualcomm. And I walked in and there were only two guys in the locker room, and it was Junior and someone else. And they were both walking on the other side of the room towards the training room. And I remember he turned back and looked and he saw me and he stopped, and I was walking towards him. He says, "Oh, you're the new guy." And he said, "I'm Junior Seau." I'm like, "I know who you are," and he just was, he couldn't have been more kind. And we talked for a minute, and he said, "If you ever need anything, you call me," and gave me his number. And I'm, it's my first day. I've never covered a pro beat like that, on a daily basis. And I'm like, this can't be
like
the way it is. Cause you had heard a few stories that Junior was kind of a diva at times. And so I'm like, I'm being set up here or something. No, seriously. And so, I said, okay, well, I'm not going to use this number unless there's something I need. And so, but at the same time, I was curious, is this really his number, or am I being punked? So like a couple of weeks later, I don't remember what happened, but there was something. So I decided, okay, I'm going to try it. And I'm half expecting Domino's Pizza, hey, welcome to Domino's Pizza. And it's his voice and his voicemail, and, and leave a message. And he called me back. So that was kind of how it all started. And, I always say that I wouldn't be where I am today if not for him, guys like him and Rodney Harrison and others who really taught me about the culture of a locker room and what it takes to cover it and to try and see things from an athlete's perspective in the locker room, and, how to develop relationships, because more so than in any other pro sports in the NFL, that divide between the team and the media is so significant that
it's crazy.
It's hard to break through sometimes. So if you have I don't want to say the backing, but the respect of the star players on a team, it makes it that much easier.
Well, you have to have the trust.
Absolutely.
I know for me, going through college and a little bit in the NFL, it's really important that when I'm saying something, I don't want my words to be chopped up and then thrown however they want it to be put. So,
Correct.
Just having that respect for people, going in the locker room. I mean, we would say stuff to each other in the locker room, which I'm sure you understand, but I mean, that you'll never say to anybody else,
Correct.
and then you have to go and tone it down to PG when you're talking to the media, and then they can, put things out of context, and it's hard. It's hard to create a good relationship, but that's awesome that they were able to say, hey, here's how you do it, and here's what we need, and you listened.
Oh, you if you're smart, you do.
Right.
And like I remember it was early on in my tenure covering the NFL, and they had signed Ryan McNeil as a free agent cornerback for a lot of money. And so we're at training camp, and Ryan just looks god awful. I mean, I'm serious. In practice, he just looks god awful, and the preseason games, I'm like, man, they just paid this guy a lot of money, and this guy's going to be a bust, and yada. And so I'm like, okay, I need to write something on this. And then I go and I talk to a few of the veterans, and they said, you have to understand the talented guys in this league, veterans, work on their weaknesses in training camp and preseason. So they're going to look bad, so that when they get into a game, they try and turn their weaknesses into strengths. And then Ryan went out that year and led the NFL in interceptions.
Oh, wow.
And
really?
And I've never forgotten that. So whenever I get to training camp and I see a veteran who might be struggling, I will, in the back of my mind, think, okay, is there an issue, or is he working on his weaknesses, trying to turn them into strengths? And then you can have that conversation with him. But it's just little lessons like that that help you in terms of building relationships with players, understanding the culture, and ultimately developing those relationships.
What advice would you have to somebody that's just starting in the game, trying to figure out how to, develop those relationships?
Listen.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, you have to listen, and you have to be willing to acknowledge to folks that you don't know everything and that you want to learn. I remember the first year I was covering the goals, and I had never been to a hockey game in my life. And it was sort of like I drew the short straw, because they came to town in the summer. Nobody was around. I'm a high school writer. Hey, go cover this press conference. And I do. And then there's not much excitement for it, at least internally. So it's like, okay, you're going to be the guy who's covering the home games, whatever. So I'm like, okay. And I'll never forget, I went to the GM at that time, who was Don Waddell, and even to the coach. And I said, I don't know anything about hockey. I mean, I know the general principles, but I don't know anything about this sport. And can you teach me? And I think that they respected that I was not going to sit there, some guy who's never even, not only never put on a pair of skates, but never even been to a game, and try and judge them on what they do. But I would come to them and ask them, why did you do certain things? And it actually turned out to be, the most fun I think I've had in this business covering any sport was covering minor league hockey.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
is that because the learning curve was so high, or?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it. I was learning, but also I think those guys respected that I wasn't trying to tell them how to do their jobs, or pretending that I knew more than they knew. And, it was just fun, because it wasn't one of those things where every little detail is dissected, and people are always on guard about something. You can actually have a conversation with guys. So I enjoyed it. People always think I'm kidding when I say that, but the most fun I've had in this business was actually covering minor league hockey.
Wow. That's crazy. I mean, and especially for somebody that has gotten to where you are. And I know you're very humble and you don't like to brag, but I mean, the ultimate sign of respect is when other people, other colleagues respect the work that you do. And I've heard multiple people, I've seen multiple people, and no matter where you go, you carry that respect.
Well, I appreciate that.
I think too, where you're talking about, I mean, for me as an athlete growing up, and I've played every single level of sports, some of my favorite times were more the innocent, like learning the fundamentals, like the high school times. Like, yeah, I played in the NFL. My favorite time was probably in high school, just having like fun, like camaraderie, learning, just being kind of vulnerable and open, like what you're saying. You're just open to learning and experiencing something new. So that was probably just really exciting for you to do that. That's
no question. It was no question. And then it didn't hurt that I can't remember if this is the last year I was on the beat or not, but the year that they set a pro hockey record for victories.
Yeah.
And what a wild season that was, where I think they started out, I think their they didn't lose until I think their 26th game or something like that. And the rest of the league hated them because they were because they were an independent, and so they were bringing in all of these former NHL guys to go with a few young guys, and the other teams, you know, who were trying to develop players were like, "What the hell are you guys doing? That's not what this is supposed to be about." And at the end of the year, they end up going to Fort Wayne in the IHL finals and got swept 4-0. And you know, everyone in the league just flat out loved it. But just to go on that journey with them where, I mean, they're untouchable for a quarter of the season, and then they hit a rough spot where they lose some guys, and then to get to the finals and get swept, it was a wild journey, but it was so much fun, man. I can't even begin to tell you.
And so after that, you said you became the beat writer for the Chargers?
After that, they had me do the NHL while still doing high schools, do the NHL at large sort of thing, you know, stuff that was going on up in LA. And then it was sort of the same thing with the NBA. I don't remember if I was covering high schools at the same time as doing some NBA stuff. But then it was the Chargers as a backup, and then the next year taking over full time as the lead.
So what is it like being the beat reporter?
For me, it was a learning experience, you know, because it was the first, at least the Chargers, it was the first professional beat I had covered, major professional beat I had covered on a daily basis. I mean, even when I was covering the goals, it wasn't on a daily basis. So when it got to the point I was covering the Chargers and you're responsible for everything that's written about them every day and the coverage and everything, it was, you know, it was interesting because I didn't necessarily have someone I felt I could lean on about that, you know, sort of a mentor while I was there to do it. Jerry McGee was there, but he wasn't around a lot. He was doing the NFL at large, so it wasn't like every day I could lean on him as much as I respected Jerry. So, you know, your first couple of years, you're operating almost out of fear. No, seriously, you know, because you don't want to get beaten on stories. You know, you want to be the voice of the beat because that's what you're there for. And so you stress over every little thing, you know, and if somebody has something you don't, you know, it sticks with you for a while, regardless of how many stories you might break.
And what year is this?
This is 96.
So this is pre-Twitter, pre-social media, pre all of that.
There's got to be a lot of anxiety that goes with that, man.
Without a question.
You know, just thinking about what else is going to come out.
Because that's all from print, right?
Yeah. And you're never off the clock. That's the thing people don't realize. You're never off the clock. It's not a 9 to 5 where you say, okay, practice is over. I've written my story. I'm done.
Right.
Anything could break after you filed. And you know, it's all day. Today is just insane. It's not just 24/7. It's like how many seconds are in a day?
Yeah.
I can't even imagine being a beat writer today because I marvel at these guys and these women today because it used to be like I would write 2 stories a day. You'd have a main story and a notebook. And now, beat writers have to do those things. They have to update everything on blogs. They have to do these video components, digital components. Sometimes they'll do radio. Sometimes like at ESPN, they'll put you on that. And so those folks are literally round the clock.
You think it's easier or harder, though?
I think it's harder. And they're getting paid the same money.
But you think, I mean, there's just so many of them. When you were doing it, I mean, it just seemed like it was just your show.
Right.
Now there's a lot more, right?
Yeah. Oh, no question. I mean, the popularity in the NFL, you've seen an explosion in terms of the credentialed folks who are covering it. And that makes it that much harder because, again, I used to look at it, I was competing against the North County Times or the Associated Press, you know, here in San Diego, not a big market in terms of coverage. So now it comes from everywhere. With social media today, everybody thinks they're a journalist, and you might have a fan who's out at a restaurant and a player's there and something happens and they post it, and now you got to react to that, right. You know? So I feel for beat writers today. I truly do.
Yeah. And how long did you cover the Chargers as a beat writer?
8 years. I always said, and and I said, I'm not getting off this beat until they have a winning season. I'm serious. So, we go, remember, I went through the 1-15 year.
Ooh, Ryan Leaf.
Yeah, I went through the 4-12. I went through all of that. And every year, it was a non-winning season. I think the best was 8-8. And I said, finally, I started in 96, and I said, I'm not leaving until they have a winning season. And finally in 04, they had a winning season and went to the playoffs. And the next year, I think it was the next year, I got off the beat. So, and then went to do the NFL at large. But that was my whole thing. I've got to prove to myself it's not me. I'm not the reason they haven't had a winning season.
Why did you make that step up to SI? Was that a natural progression of things, or is that what did they come after you?
No. Well, what happened? It's funny, this industry, the way it works. So I had been covering the Chargers for X number of years, and I'd been getting really good performance reviews. And you're going around the country and you start hearing what some of your colleagues make. And I remember I went to, after one review, I said to, it was with the sports editor and then the person above him. And I said, hey, how do I get paid like other folks who are doing the same beat around the country? And they're like, oh, well, what do they make? And so I said, well, they make this. And, it's kind of like, oh.
How much was that?
I want to say at that time, I said it was like 75 a year or something like that. And they were like, ooh, like
this is the Union Tribune, right?
Yeah, we can't, we're Guild. We have a scale. And I'm like, and I said, so what you're telling me is the only way I could get paid comparable to what colleagues around the country make is if I get an offer from someplace else. And of course they, try and say, no, that's not true or whatnot. But, by pure coincidence, within a month, I remember I got a call from the Star Ledger in New Jersey. And so I'm going to give all these figures and, probably shouldn't, but what the heck. So I go
behind
out,
the smoke. It's fine.
So I go out and I interview with, I tell them, hey, I got, Star Ledger wants me to come out and interview to be their NFL writer. So like, okay. And I'm really not interested at that point in moving to New Jersey, but I'm like, hey, I got to play the game now because that's how they've set it up.
Totally.
So I go out and I interview and the sports editor who recently passed away, his name was Chris D'Amico, great guy. And now I'm expected not to be interested at all. So I get there and we have dinner and all of this. And at the end of the night, Chris says, hey, we want to hire you. And he says, he said, what we can do is we can offer you, I know you love San Diego, but we can offer you, I think he said, $91,000, and we can offer you a annual bonus, for this amount, yada, yada. And I'm like, 91. And
what's a bonus in journalism based off of?
Well, for them, it was more of, everybody's different and not everybody does it, but they might call it a Christmas bonus.
Okay.
And let's say it's, an extra $5,000 or $10,000 or something,
right.
It could be anything. So I'm like, holy crap. I'm like, here I was asking for like 75 and now this guy's offering me like, 90. And so, I remember I called up the sports center and I said, hey, these guys have offered me the job. And he's like, you mind if I ask what they're offering you? And I said, yeah, he's offering me 91 plus a bonus. And there was like this silence. and he goes, I'll never forget. He goes, I'm not surprised they offered you. He goes, I just didn't know it would be that much. And I said, did you guys think I was lying to you when I told you what folks were making? And so then they came back, I think, and they said, well, what if we offered you like, I'm just pulling a number out here. I think maybe 80. And I said, I'll stay. I said, I never wanted to go in the first place. So that's how I got my raise.
Nice.
And then like a year later, the Boston Globe calls and I'm like, well, okay. So I'm like, you got to listen to them. So
Round two.
I go out and I listen to them and they were like, we want to hire you to cover the Patriots. And they were like, we'll pay you like $112,000 a year. I'm like, $112,000. I'm like, I didn't know guys were getting paid like that. And they're like, you do some TV and this, and so I called.
I'll do whatever you want.
For
112.
I'm like, honey, we're moving. And so I came back and this time I didn't meet with the sports editor. They had me actually meet with the editor of the paper, and she's like, I've always been a fan of yours, and I've even taking bullets from you when, John Butler and others tried to get you pulled off the beat and all these things. And I'm like, okay. And then she's like, we don't want you to go. And what if we were to offer you 100? And I'm looking at her like, you can do that? I'm like, a couple of years ago, I was trying to get 75 and you guys couldn't give me that.
What happened?
So long story short, that ended up happening and I stayed. And then a year after that or so, Sports Illustrated, a couple of guys moved on. So I knew they had openings. And for anyone who's in the sports journalism profession, like at that time growing up, Sports Illustrated was it.
Yeah. Right.
So I just said, I just want to throw my name in the hat, and
did you have an agent at this time?
No, I've never had an agent. Up until after I got to ESPN, but I threw my name in the hat. I reached out to someone there. Long story short, I ended up getting an interview, and then they offered me. And then again, I got called into the editor's office, and she was like, there's probably nothing we can do at this point.
We don't sell enough papers to make that happen.
No, I said, I appreciate everything you've done. And I did. She was great for me, but I'm like, this is something I got to try, I at least have to do for however long, and see what it's all about. And so I ended up at that point moving on to Sports Illustrated. The great part was, I didn't have to move. So the only thing that changed for me was the masthead, and not, anything else, which was great.
I think that's one of the great things about the world we live in is that you can work for companies like Sports Illustrated and ESPN and not have to leave a place like San Diego.
Yeah, the older I've gotten, because I know there are certain jobs I wouldn't move for.
Yeah.
And I don't care. Like even at Sports Illustrated, they'd have to let me write my own check to get me to move to Bristol.
Yeah.
And they pretty much know that. So you get to a certain age where you say, quality of life and those things are as important or more important than the name of the company.
Sure.
And when you're young, you're always chasing that, whatever it is, that carrot. And then you get to a certain point where you realize that it's not so much about money and all these other things. It's about, like I said, quality of life and the enjoyment of what you're doing and all those sorts of things.
When you find that happy balance, it's really hard to give it up for no matter what, however much money.
Exactly.
Shawn and I talk about it too. Could I make more money doing what I do? And yeah, I could. And I could push the envelope a little bit more. But is it important for me to have time with my kids and do those things? Yeah, that's important. And maybe I do lose some money sometimes. I'm very fortunate. I have a very lovely wife who does a lot, but I mean, man, in the mornings, taking them to school, the rides to school that I make sure I take them to school every morning, it's fun. We sing stupid songs. We, joke around. It's like, that's time with dad that, could I come in at 4 a.m. and probably get a lot of stuff done and wouldn't be up to my neck in paperwork? Sure. But it's not worth it to me.
Exactly.
So I just, kind of delegate and push it to other people. And it's important just to find that happy place.
There's no doubt about it. If my children weren't grown and they were young, let's say elementary school, whatever now, I don't think I could do this ESPN job because I'm traveling more now than I have at any point in my career. And I don't think I would have made that trade-off. I'd like to think I would not have made that trade-off. So
sure.
It's just interesting how things in my career have worked out. A lot of times I feel like I have a guardian angel who looks out for me. Even when I got let go at SI, and they told me, I'll never forget, because I was in New York for the Super Bowl and we had been having layoffs and they had just put out another email saying that there was another round coming, and my boss, my immediate boss at that time, told me he didn't think it applied to me. And I'm like, okay. So I go about my business, and a month and a half later, I get the call saying, we got to let you go. It's not a performance issue. We're trying to be as lean as possible because they wanted to take the magazine public and they were going to have an IPO. And I, for a moment there, it's the first time I've ever been laid off. You wonder what's next, and now you got a family and all of that. And, you know, within a few hours, I knew I was fine because I had a few places reach out to me. So it wasn't a big concern, but,
That's got to feel good.
It did. But at the same time, I'll say this too. It felt, I don't want to say I felt guilty, but I felt bad for friends who were in the same situation, who weren't as fortunate, and and who are really good. And, it really opened my eyes up to the business about what's really going on and where it's going and how long I would be a part of it. You just don't know, because it's no longer about your performance. It's about so many other factors that have nothing to do with you. And will I get to the finish line in this business? I have no idea, you know, the way things are going. I don't know that any of us do. So all you can do, and all I try and do, is two things. One, do the best work that I can. And then two, always have a plan B, you know, or to do what I can to have a plan B in case it doesn't work. Or in case, you know, something happens beyond my control. And that was the lesson I took from Sports Illustrated.
Tell us about one of the things that's so fascinating, which I talk about frequently, is your time at that table when they came in and they told you about Twitter at SI.
Yeah, I was in New York and they came in or they had a meeting. They brought us into a conference room and they told us they wanted us to do Twitter. And at that moment, I looked at him like, what's Twitter? You know? And
it's probably the way I look at Shawn.
The way Derek looks at me every day.
Yeah, you know?
What mention? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I've been tweeting at you all day.
And they explained it. And at first my reaction was, man, I'm not interested in this. You know, I'm just not. And then my reaction was, knowing what the climate was in the business and whatnot, hey, you better adjust, or, you know, you can be a dinosaur and become extinct, or you can adjust and try and keep living. And so I adjusted and said, I'm going to try and, use it to my advantage. And that time I was naive and said, this will be an opportunity to engage with fans, all those sorts of things, not even knowing what a troll was at that time. I had no idea what a troll was. Yeah, you know, and so
I saw you engaging with some trolls yesterday.
She wasn't a troll. She was, you know, and I got her point.
But she just kept on going after it.
Well, you know, she wanted to make a point, I guess, because, and again, I was sincere when I said my condolences to her. She had lost a son to, she said, CTE, which I don't know if that's true or that's not in terms of him passing from CTE. But what I didn't like was when I initially put out the tweet, that an interesting stat I had learned yesterday from the NFL, that of all of the concussion evaluations this year that have taken place, I think it was 37% were from self-evaluation, and, you know, which was up from the previous year where it was 22%. And so she bounced back at me about it's brain injuries, you know, not concussions, which I'm like, okay. And then she had some other thing about the media, quote unquote, the media always siding with sports teams or with sports. And I'm like, obviously you don't know who I am, because I get in more trouble from the league for going after the league on these issues. So I kind of resented her putting us all in one box. And so it just went back and forth a little bit. And then finally I just, you know, I told her I just didn't think it was right that she says that essentially only mothers who have lost children can live this pain. And like, I have a friend who died in part from CTE. And so then she gave me this stupid analogy that's like saying that you're a white person and you have friends who are black. That makes you racist. And I just told her that's the dumbest thing I've heard on Twitter today. And I guess she didn't like it. So she said something else. And finally I just told her, you know, my condolences for your loss, but your logic is still ridiculous. And I'll give you the last word as I move out. Yeah. So she told me to get the fuck out of here. So.
Well, let's talk about the fact. I mean, just the fact that self-reporting is up. I mean, somebody
but that's it. See, she took that. I think, and if I could get in her head, which might be a dangerous place, but I think what she took that to mean was that I was buying into the belief that it's on players to report their condition. And I said to her, even in the tweet, that no, it's not just about players reporting it. The league has people who are looking out for it. They have an independent observer up above. They have independent neurologists on the sideline. They are looking out for the players too. The point I was making is that it's great, and I was hoping people would take, it's great that players are now becoming more educated about their health and are taking accountability for it.
Sure.
That they are stepping up, because the culture had always been, and Derek would know this, the culture had always been, you don't come out of a game.
Absolutely.
You know?
I was just going to jump in and say that. I mean, it's you push through everything.
Exactly.
Like, how many fingers do I have up? Like, coach, hit me how many times, how many fingers? 'Cause I don't know. Oh,
Yeah.
3? Perfect. You're good. Go back in. I mean, I have 8 documented concussions. So I probably had 20 concussions that I just worked through. And
those documented weren't self-documented. Those
No.
were like,
No, I had to
they
go
ripped
get
you,
a
they ripped you the fuck out of the
and,
game.
Yeah. Hid my helmet and I was throwing up and, you know,
Yeah.
all those signs. But yeah, you were taught you just push through it. Like, be tough, get back in there. You got your bell rung.
Exactly.
That's what it was.
You got a dinger.
Yeah. You know, and it's just like, okay, here I go. I'm going right back in. It is awesome to see that people are taking it serious.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, is it a serious thing? Absolutely. Does a game itself suck a little more because we're taking a little bit more precaution? Absolutely. It's not, but you have to do that. What's more important, this game or these guys playing it? And,
Absolutely.
I mean, it sucks. I get it. And people are like, oh man, they're not letting them play football. Well, fuck. I mean, you can't say, yeah, go ahead, just keep bleeding through your head when we know we're having these issues. It's not safe. And I'm proud to see that it is coming to the forefront and people are stepping up saying, hey, no, I probably shouldn't go back in right now. I'm good with not going back in.
Somebody told me X number of years ago the self-reporting was only 7%.
Really?
Yeah. So we've gone from 7, to 37 in a handful of years. I think it's tremendous. And, to speak to the game changing, I'll never forget this. My last conversation with Junior, which was 3 months before he died, we were talking about the whole Bounty Gate situation. And then, as just an aside, before we got off the phone, I said to him, what do you think of what Goodell is doing to the game? People say he's making the game soft. And I'll never forget this now, because in hindsight, it really unnerved me a little bit. And he said he has to do it. I said, what do you mean he has to do it? And he said, if he doesn't do it, he said, we're going to have more fathers waking up in the morning who don't remember their own name and who don't remember their kids' names and who can't function. He goes, so it has to be done. And at the time, I just kind of like wrote it off like, yeah, okay. And then after his death, I was like, oh man, he was talking about himself.
Yeah.
And I had no idea. And when you go through the book and you see, yeah, he was talking about himself. So I'm one of those people who say, yeah, the game has changed and I don't like it necessarily, but I understand why it's happening. And so for me to see that 37% of players are reporting what they believe to be concussions, or as this woman would say, brain injuries, I think it's outstanding, and I hope that number continues to climb, not because I want the onus put on the player, but because players are becoming educated about their health and taking accountability for it.
And when they're having symptoms, it's okay to hang it up. You see some of these guys having early retirement, and they're like, dude, are you fucking serious? He's in his prime. It's like, no, guys, you don't know what it's like to wake up in the morning, like Junior said, not knowing. Like, you're in a fog. Like, hey, I'm fucking hungover, but I didn't drink anything. I didn't have any alcohol last night, nothing, but I just feel like I'm out of it. Yeah. And I mean, after a game, when you're concussed like that, it's no joke.
No.
And you just feel like, man, and then you could start to come and figure it out. Then it's like, okay, let's go do it again. But people are being self-aware. They're understanding this. What does the NFL stand for, right? Not for long. Right. Like everyone says, it's only going to be a few years of your life. You can cut it, and then you have the rest of your life to do stuff. So don't fret about taking a year or two off the NFL. Do it.
No, I
take care of yourself.
I think it's outstanding when they, is this a trend? Guys are leaving the league earlier and whatnot. I was like, no, it's not a trend necessarily. And there will always be a talent pool to pull from. But I said, I also think it's outstanding that guys can say now, you know what? Something's more important than this game. I think that's great, you know,
Sure.
and I don't think it means the end of the NFL, again, because there will always be a talent pool available. But I just think it's awesome that these guys say there are things that are more important to me than playing football.
I think it puts it in perspective too when you have kids.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
a lot of
Sure.
my mindset now compared to what it was, 5 years ago is just completely different. I would have worked through fucking anything. Where now it's like, whoa, I got to make sure I'm around for my kids. I can't run through this brick wall. I can't, maybe there's a way around it. Can I go around this brick wall or jump over it instead of having to run through it all the time? Yeah. So I think it's just important for people just to be self-aware, the football players, to understand that there's life after football. And that's what I tell people all the time. Like when it's all said and done and I'm not here anymore, I hope that people talk about me and don't ever mention football because life's so much more than football. I don't want everyone to say he was an All-American, he was this. Like, nope, I don't want any of that being said. Hopefully I can do my job and do more for the community where people are like, oh no, he was a good guy. He gave, back to the community. He helped. And football is not even a mention,
Yeah, I think for you to cover Junior and to write the book that you did, can you talk about the challenges of dealing with something as controversial as CTE, as controversial as alcoholism, drug addiction, somebody that was your friend, that you had to go and get resources through family members, that, you're putting out a portrayal of this man's life and this man's life of what he meant to San Diego as well. Because, just as Derek said, he was so much more than football. I mean, what he did for the community, what he did with his foundation, what he continues to do.
The hardest part of the book was not dealing with those issues with CT or alcoholism or depression or any of that. It was more of trying to be sensitive to the family and more specifically as children, knowing that they're going to read this book and they have a certain image of their father. And, I wasn't going to lie about anything in terms of who he was or what he did, that sort of thing. But there were certain things that I felt I didn't need to include in the book. One, because they didn't know about it, and it wasn't necessarily going to, it would have been clickbait, for lack of a better word.
Sure.
And I just didn't feel comfortable doing that. So I could tell the public what his issues were and give a few stories, that sort of thing, without going into every seedy detail that might have happened late in his life. And, and I've always said to people, that makes me a bad journalist, so be it. But it means I can sleep at night, so I'm good with it.
And if his kids ever want to dig deeper, you're not going anywhere. I mean, they can come talk to you. I've always said that too. It's like, hey, there's some things that are just better left unsaid. But if you ever really want to dig into it and I had one of my best friends pass away, and there's some dark stories about him, and it was with his mom, and I'm like, if you ever want to know, I'll talk to you about whatever you want, but some things are just better left unsaid.
Yeah, that's how I felt, and that's how I treated it. My hope was that the book would it could be a roadmap for some players who think that they have to be, more myth than man, that they can't be human. And my thing was, if there was one thing I wanted athletes to take away from the book, is that if you're hurting, it's okay to ask for help.
Right.
That it's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength, because so often athletes are told any sign of vulnerability or any sign of weakness, is going to hurt you in your career. Yep. And, and Junior was that way. He was a guy that when he was injured or whatever, he wouldn't go in the training room. He would have the trainers come to him at training camp at his dorm. No,
he would do it privately.
Yeah, he was that way. Or he would go in so early before anyone else got there. He'd have the trainer meet him there. But whether that was because he felt it was important to portray that certain image, I don't know. Whether or not he didn't want to be seen as less than a myth, I don't know, but that's the way he handled it. He rarely, if ever, would get treated in the training room when anyone was around.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'll always remember, I was fortunate to become friends with Lou Bush, who played with Junior, and he attributes all of his success in the NFL to the time that he spent with Junior, where Junior sat him down and said, hey, listen, I know you're a young buck and you want to be, you want to make a name for yourself in this league, but you got to work. You got to put the fucking work in.
He did it. It didn't matter if you were the first man or the 53rd man on the roster. If you were willing to work and you wanted to learn, he was there for you. And he would do things like when he did the Breakfast Club. He started the Breakfast Club. The year that, what year would that have been? It would have been 90. I want to say 98, but I might be wrong. But it was after Kevin Gilbride got fired and June Jones took over. And the Chargers had always had their practices in the morning. Well, June Jones wanted to have them in the afternoon. So Junior and the guys started with, what they call the Breakfast Club, where you would come in, you would work out before the day even started. And he didn't go around and invite you. It was like, okay, if you are serious about this, you'll show up.
Right.
Yeah.
And the guys who showed up, he gave them everything he had. But if you didn't show up, it told him what you were about, and he wasn't going to waste much time on you. But you can go back to Orlando Ruff, an undrafted rookie out of Furman, and linebacker comes in, and you know how difficult it is for undrafted guys to make a team. And Junior saw how he worked, how serious he was. He took him under his wing. And Orlando will tell you today he played in the league as long as he did because of Junior. Rodney Harrison will tell you the same thing. He learned how to be a pro from Junior. The man was just so giving. That's why it was so disappointing, his death, where he didn't reach out to anyone, for help. Because I can tell you, anyone who knew him would have dropped everything.
Sure.
And given what they had to try and help him.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the toughest things is, like we said, the CTE on top of everything else. Sure. And, alcoholism,
sure.
Me personally dealing with my alcoholism and, being sober to this day, 4.5 years, coming up on 5 years, it's changed my life. And, I was living at a time where I was trying to run my business and still drink and still do the things that I did. And just removing that one factor really changed me forever, and I wouldn't be here with you podcasting, talking to Derek. And I'm convinced of that. And that was just alcoholism. And then that was my struggle with alcoholism. And it's rampant throughout the league. I mean, Derek knows, going to college, and even for people that didn't play D1 football. I went to Boulder and we were a drinking school. We celebrated the fact that we were voted #1 drinking school.
Oh yeah.
That was a badge of honor.
Some natty light. we would put them down, and that was at K-State. We partied hard. It's with the opiates now and all the pills, we would call them cocktails.
Yeah.
We would we had a trainer, and, he'd always say, Derek, you're probably the toughest guy I've ever been a trainer for. But it's going to catch up to you someday, cause I'll play through anything. I broke my arm, played screws, everything. The next week against Missouri, I'm out there playing with the club on my arm, with a nerve block. And, but it was those things where it was like cocktails. What cocktail? What are you going to give me? What in the 5 different pills, and you're taking them, and you feel great. And you're getting a shot before the game. And to be honest, it's not one shot. We're getting multiple shots, and just getting out there to do it. You can see how people can become addicted to that and be dependent on it. Me, fortunately, I was able to kind of back away from that, and I don't even like taking Tylenol now, just because I knew what it was. And then you kind of I was kind of used, they were just using me. My coaches were just fucking using me to put, because they knew I was going to do it. Just give me whatever I can to get me out there, because it's money for them. Sure, they have to win. And but if there's ever anyone out there that's dealing with it, you got to talk to somebody. It's important to communicate. And one of my best friends, I'm a good friend, not this Corey, but my other friend Corey, he deals with alcoholism as well. And he just got back on the wagon, got back, started going to his meetings again. And you just have to communicate. You have to be vulnerable. You have to, it's a disease.
I think that's one of the powerful things is when you share Junior's story, and it's exactly what you said. You're not doing it, me knowing who you are. You're not doing it to sell 5 million books, and to retire and play golf in Kauai. Even though I know you'd love to do that.
Whoa! That sounds great.
But exactly what you said. It's the context, and it's really revealing the story and letting other players know that it's okay. And there's so much. We live in a world where you have to be strong and you have to put this best foot forward. But really, people have struggles that they deal with.
No doubt. Eddie George told me this story for guys who have long, productive careers. And he said he learned to view it this way, that when you come into the NFL, it's a birth. It's the start of a new life. And he said when you're let go, it's a death. And that life is over. And he said the problem is that players don't know how to grieve. They don't go through the grieving process, and they don't go ask for help again because you've been taught all your life, don't show vulnerability. Asking for help is a sign of weakness. And so Eddie went through this dark period for a time, not where he thought about suicide, but where things got really bad, whether it was drinking, women, whatever. And finally, he went to counseling, and his wife got him to go to counseling. And he said it made all the difference in his life. And he realized that he wasn't playing football for himself. He had always been playing it for his father because his father loved the game and whatnot. And Eddie realized that his passion was in other places. And that's why you see him now in the theater and acting and doing these things. So he said that's the thing that in his mind, players, something they have to learn to deal with is to say that you're going to go through a grieving process when you're out of the game. The question is, how do you deal with it? And so many players are afraid to say, I need help. I can't deal with it.
You know who taught me about that? Junior Seau. When I talked to him about it, and he was, he might not have taken his own advice, but he was just saying people are always searching for that high. You're not going to get that running out of the tunnel, 60, 70,000 people cheering. You make a nice play, everyone's cheering for you. You're never going to achieve that high, but that's okay. It's okay to not have that anymore. And how do you deal with that? Like you're saying, Eddie George had to go to counseling. It's hard. It's extremely hard because for so long, like I always say, I don't want to be known as a football player, but that's who you are. Sure. I mean, my whole life was like that. And that's why, Shawn, people might not understand sometimes. I don't like to engage too much in football anymore just because I gave so much to it. It's kind of liberating to kind of let it go, and just not be a part of that anymore. But that's part of my grieving. That's part of how I deal with it. And people need to, like what you're saying, just be open. Yeah. It's okay. It's part of the process. It sucks. Hang those cleats up, hanging my cleats up when they're like, okay, we're going to send you to NFL Europe. And I said, I don't deserve to go there. I'm not going to go there. I'll wait, for next season. I'll get picked up and go play again. Well, I'm still fucking waiting. No one's ever fucking called. You know what I mean? But it's like to have to come to grips with, like, man. And then now I'm thinking, why the fuck didn't I go travel Europe in a beautiful place and go to experience shit? But my ego got in the way. But it's being able to, okay, that chapter's closed. Now it's time to move on. Those are hard things to swallow sometimes.
Oh, it's extremely difficult. I mean, Orlando Ruff tells a story in the book where, so he gets out of football and, he's ready to the second phase of his life, and he thinks he's prepared and everything else. And he tries to start a business and it fails. And he goes, as an athlete, okay, what are you taught? When you fail, you get back up and you go back at it. So he got back up, he went back at it, and the second business failed. And all of a sudden now you start questioning yourself. And cause now you're not used to failure. You've always been a success. To get to that level, you had to succeed. And then he went through a dark time where he even says he could have been junior. And it's funny how life works sometimes. He had a workers' comp case, involving the NFL, and all of a sudden he's waiting on his case and he's asking questions about it, and all of a sudden the light goes off. That's sort of his purpose. So he goes to law school, and now he got his degree and everything, and now he's working for this company, and that's what he deals with. So if there is a way, and I don't know how you do it, even though every player who comes in the NFL knows it's going to end at some point, it's how do they start preparing for life after football while still playing? Because so many coaches and organizations might say to you, if you're already thinking about that, you've got a foot out the door, and we're looking to replace you. Whereas others would say, no, that's smart if we really care about the individual as opposed to the player. So there's that fine line there that somehow has to be addressed. And I know some organizations are better than others in terms of addressing it. But then you have coaches, as you were saying earlier, who know that their job depends on winning.
Sure. And
so they want that guy who's just going to blindly do whatever it takes to try and win.
So as tragic as the Junior Seau's loss was to you and to all of the football world, talk about what it meant to you to be in the room for his induction into the Hall of Fame, for the vote, and for kind of presenting him.
It was funny. I didn't have to present him long. I basically remember, because that room, the day in that room gets really long. I mean, we started like, 7 something.
How many writers?
It's now up to 48 voters.
48 voters.
Including 2.
So they're not all writers?
2 Hall of Famers. No, they're not all writers. There's some are TV, some are radio. They're media members. And now we added 2 Hall of Famers in the room. And I don't know if they're going to rotate the Hall of Famers or not.
So they're part of the voters now?
Last year, yeah. It was Dan Fouts and James Lofton last year. So when Junior came up, it had been sort of a long day already. And then I kind of said, look, I said, I respect all of your knowledge about these candidates. And I said, so I don't want to insult it. And give you a bunch of information on Junior. I said, we all know he played 20 years. He went to the Pro Bowl 12 times. He was considered one of the greatest at his position. And I said, really, I don't know that I need to say any more than that. I said, if I do, I'm happy to answer any questions, and then just left it at that. And there may have been a few people who wanted to speak on his behalf as well. But look, Junior was going to get into the hall with or without me. So I just wish he had been here to see it himself, because it's something that he wanted.
Well, I agree. That'd have been great. I know it meant a lot to him too, and it's unfortunate. But it was good to see his kids out there and his mom, and you hear some of the stories about how they did and how excited they were and how emotional it was. It's part of grieving, part of the process for them. I mean, it's a big loss, man. It's still, I mean, to this day, he meant a lot to me too, and it's a big loss for everyone that was involved in the community and that knew him personally. It was a tough one.
No, I get it all the time. John Lynch and I were talking not too long ago, and he just said, man, just out of the blue, I miss him. I miss Buddy.
Right. That's what a Buddy.
And that's how everyone who knew him feels about him.
Sure.
A tremendous loss.
Yeah, I mean, just hearing, the Dave and Jeff podcast, he brings on C.S. Keys, and C.S. Keys had such a, close friendship with Junior, and to hear him tell those stories, it brings chills down the spine, because how much, that friendship meant to them. And it's not just them, but, for me, just being a fan of the Chargers and just seeing it from afar and, seeing the impact that he had, someone that had a restaurant. I mean, that restaurant was huge. I mean, that restaurant was enormous restaurant, in Mission Valley, and it became a center for him to host his foundation, the charity tournaments, for him to host fight night, for him to, have a place. And, the way he treated that restaurant is the way that my grandfather's treated our restaurant, and if you're not in, Junior was so hospitable. I mean, that's all the stories you hear, to all the people that he impacted their lives, is he was always welcoming, and he
made everyone feel important.
No doubt. Well, the most interesting, one of the more interesting stories in the book that I found was, I was talking to Mark Davis, the owner of the Raiders, and so they had played here in San Diego, and Mark was going to drive over to Palm Springs the next day, but that night he wanted to see the game that was on Sunday Night Football. So someone told him to go down to Junior's to watch the games. And he walks in, and there's Junior at the front desk working. And so they had never sort of formally met. And Mark told him, if I remember the story right, Mark told him, I've always hated your ass. He said, because you always beat the Raiders or made it tough on them. And Junior gives him the big old hug, and Buddy, and they go up to his office upstairs, and for like 2 hours they're there, and they don't talk football. That's the thing Mark told me. They never talk football. They just talk life. And the next year Mark came back, he went there again, and he goes, that's kind of how their relationship was. And again, that was Junior, whether you were meeting him for the first time or the 100th time, he always made you feel special.
Sure. So one of the coolest things that I've seen recently is seeing somebody that I now consider such a close friend being in Jerry's helicopter.
Ah.
So let's not play around, and let's get to the meat and potatoes of how Jim Trotter goes from covering the Gulls as a beat writer all the way to getting in that helicopter. I mean, I'm guessing not too many people get that ticket.
Look, Jerry's a smart man. You know, he knows how to butter folks up. He knows that he's having a big profile done on him, so he's going to roll out the red carpet. I mean, I'm not kidding myself here. But no, we were doing a piece on Jerry prior to the Hall of Fame induction because he's one of the more charismatic figures in the NFL, whether you like him or hate him. He's a guy that everybody knows, and he sparks some sort of response. And so part of the thing, we just spent time over the off season visiting with him. We went that day. We were in the helicopter because we had left practice, and he was going to see his grandson play in a summer passing league game. And if you know, in Dallas around rush hour, the traffic can get really bad. So, you know, for folks who live at that other end of the financial spectrum, for me, Jerry takes from Frisco to Dallas. It would have taken us a good 45 minutes to an hour. We jump in the helicopter. It's a 10-minute ride, you know, and so we go and we.
Where's
watch.
the passing league game?
It's at one of the high schools. Yeah.
Is there a pad for the chopper to land?
No. He lands at a field. I'm not sure how far away. And then the car's there waiting for him. And, you know, the driver takes us to the game. And we watch the game. And then, you know, he leaves and gets back in the, or actually his home is not far from the high school. So, but if he wanted to, he could get back in the copter and go back out to Frisco, but there wasn't a need. But that's how the other half lives, man.
Well, so, I mean, one of the most fascinating things about that story is something that's very applicable to us behind the smoke barbecue war stories is
you guys
where
in helicopters too?
I'd love to have a helicopter to get to Del Mar. That would be great. No, but is how he started. And kind of Jerry's dad and started in the grocery business. If you could just tell us a little bit about, you know, the bow tie Jerry and.
Yeah. You know, Jerry's father was, he and his mother were entrepreneurs, and Jerry was actually born in Los Angeles. A lot of people don't know. He lived there till he was about 5. And then the family moved to Arkansas, but the family owned his mom and dad owned a grocery store, and the family lived above the store. And his dad and his mom, particularly his dad, were known as ultimate salespeople. And so when Jerry was young, 9, 10, whatever, his mom would dress him up in his Sunday best and sometimes put the bow tie on, and Jerry would stand out front and welcome the customers coming in. And then if his mom saw, for instance, a woman who needed help, and the thinking being too, she would tip, you know, young Jerry for helping. She'd kind of give Jerry a wink, and he would go over and help this woman and typically get some sort of tip. But like the dad would have, you know, a DJ, so to speak, in the middle of the store with music, and on certain days to bring people in, not just for buying groceries, but to get them in there to hear music or whatever. In fact, he later went on to sell insurance, and there was a sort of program, and he was known as the Remarkable Mr. Jones, I believe it was. And Jerry's the same way. His parents understood, and he understands that business is about relationships. And so more than anything, what you're going to get from Jerry is he is going to try and connect with you on a one-on-one. He may be full of shit, but he is going to try and connect with you because he feels that's the way to get things done, as opposed to, you know, and I know this sounds silly now, especially with him feuding with Roger Goodell, but as opposed to being a hardliner on one side, he's going to try and find a way to schmooze you and bring you over to his side, whatever it is.
Do you think if Jerry Jones was the owner of the Chargers that we would have gotten a stadium built here?
Yes.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah.
No question.
But
he's not.
He's not.
He's not.
He's not.
So there we are in LA.
No, I mean, as you know, the stadium situation here came down to one thing, and it was a lack of trust on both sides. And we can go through all the reasons. I'm sure they've been gone through forever. But it came down essentially to a lack of trust on both sides to get a deal done. With someone like Jerry, I believe he would not have let it get to that point, and he would have found a way, the right people, to schmooze, to whatever, to somehow make it happen.
So let's talk a
and
little.
He was a candidate to buy the Chargers back in the day.
I did see that.
Yeah,
I did see that. How things would be different.
It would have been interesting.
It would have been interesting for sure. So what does Jim have on the docket? What's he working on? What's keeping you? What keeps the fire burning in your belly?
Just trying to tell good stories. We've got one on Kareem Hunt we're working on now.
Nice.
Also focusing on, all this social justice issue with the players. I think you're going to hear something in the next week or so about that. And that's it, going to games, going to the Cowboy game this weekend. They're playing the Eagles. So, just trying to stay somewhat relevant, stay employed.
Trying to stay employed.
Trying to stay employed.
What advice do you have to people that are trying to get into sports entertainment business?
Well, sports entertainment is different from journalism.
Sure.
So I don't know that I can speak to sports entertainment. I can speak to sports journalism. One, you better have a thick skin. Two, you better be versatile. Three, read, write as much as possible, and always be willing to listen. I'm trying to remember what the saying is. How does it go? You should always, what is it? You should always listen twice as much as you speak, something along those lines, but it just reflecting the importance of listening and learning, because you'll never know everything in this business.
And do you think that the world that we're moving towards, the sports, you say it's sports journalism, is different than sports entertainment? Do you see the blending of those two worlds coming together with all the social media apps that we have, all the demands that, like you said, the beat writers have these days? Sure.
The ESPN is for entertainment.
There you go.
So, yeah, that line is always being blurred. And it's a tough one, because for guys like me who grew up a certain way in this business, we view things a certain way, and you see it changing all the time. So I could not have imagined we would be in the state we are today with this business. When I came into journalism, there was no internet, there were no cell phones, which meant there was no social media, all those sorts of things. People were basically just beginning to the transition from typing your stories on typewriters to, these old laptop computers. So things are changing so quickly.
Macintoshes.
Yeah. We called them the Trash 80, TRS 80, the Trash 80. But I'm fascinated and I'm scared to see where this is all going to go in the next 5 to 10 years.
What are you doing to prepare for it?
Writing books.
Are you on Snapchat?
No.
Will you get on Snapchat?
Is ESPN
going to have that meeting with Jim Trotter?
If I'm told to, I will. But I had to cut back on social media, because they're just too many. So I just said, at one point I had Facebook and Twitter and all this other stuff, and finally I dropped Facebook and just said, I'm on Twitter. That's enough.
You're on Instagram too.
Well, I'm on Instagram, but Instagram, I messed up on Instagram because Instagram is more personal, with whether it's my dog or whatever. And initially when I did it, again, not understanding social media, I didn't make it a private page. And so there were a number of people that got on it before it was private. And then I realized you can make it private, and I did. So then the debate in my mind was, do I go through and I just block all these people that I don't know? Or do I just go forward? So I just said, I'll go forward, and if something comes up I don't like, then I'll take some sort of action.
So it's still private? You're not going to public that?
No, never. It'll never be public.
There you go.
Never.
But you got that behind-the-scenes access, if you're as lucky as me, to follow you and see your
There's
dog
nothing
photos.
exciting about it. You can tell them that. You may be behind the scenes, but there's nothing exciting about it, man. So
come on now.
No, there's nothing. Yeah, you can see it there. There's nothing. There's nothing exciting.
Oh,
I don't live in exciting
bullshit.
life. You see it. There's
Don't
nothing
don't you
exciting there.
bullshit.
What's exciting? My dog at the ocean?
That's exciting.
That is exciting.
You know?
Nala can fetch.
Yes, she can.
Yes, she can.
That's my baby. Yes, she can.
Nala can fetch. Well, Jim, it's an honor to call you a friend. It's an honor to have you in the Fight Night crew with Jeff Dotseth and CS Keys and Dave Pellet. I know we don't have our own theme song like CS, but
CS Keys.
Maybe one day.
No, I love it. I'm honored you guys finally had me on. It took long enough, man.
Oh, we got it. You got.
I thought I was starting to feel like the stepchild. Or something, man, you know?
No, we know we watch you. We follow you on Twitter. We see where you are, and we know your demanding schedule. And we're just honored that we could fit you in and get you some tri-tip for lunch. And
I appreciate that, brother.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Be sure to check out his book, Life and Death, the football icon. Unbelievable access, unbelievable context.
Stay tuned for Larry Fitzgerald. Very
fired up for Larry Fitzgerald. When's that coming out?
The fall after he retires, whenever that is.
Whenever that is. All right. And then we'll look for the book with Jerry Jones.
No. Actually, I would love to.
There you go.
I really would. You talk about a bestseller.
Oh, yeah. I'd love to read that.
Ooh.
I'd love to read that.
I would too.
Well, thank you, Jim, for your time. Derek and I are honored to have you here, and let's go get some slow smoked tri-tip.
Thanks for having me. Let's do it.